As Jonathan mentioned, today is going to be a different kind of a service. Our sole focus today is going to be on the persecuted church around the world. I was asked by Jonathan to share with you why this ministry is so important to me, and I think that's probably best summed up by this passage from Matthew 25. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothing, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. And I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to eat, or something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Now, I don't necessarily think that Jesus said these words explicitly with the persecuted church in mind, but this passage does fit like a glove. Perhaps one person is hungry because their father lost their employment because he's a Christian. Maybe another is thirsty because they were kicked out of their village for professing Christ, and they lost access to the village well. Another found themselves a stranger because they were excommunicated from their tribe because of their faith. And everyone they encountered just said, "Keep moving, you can't stay here." Another had their house burnt to the ground along with all of their personal belongings, except for the clothes on their back. And yet another believer fell to sickness because health care was denied them. Finally, there are those who are imprisoned because of their love of Jesus. And through the millennia, literally millions, perhaps tens of millions of people have been jailed because they professed the kingdom of God. Jesus said that to the degree that we stand with these people, both through material means and through prayer, we stand with him. And then he says that if we do this, we will be richly rewarded. Standing with Jesus. This is why we need to minister to our persecuted brothers and sisters. I'd like to introduce Pastor Gary Stagg and Andrew Croft, who will be sharing with us ways that we can minister to the oppressed. Gary's passion for the plight of the persecuted Christians was first ignited during a life-changing tour in a restricted nation. He views standing with the marginalized and oppressed to be a mandate of faith and an expression of Christian maturity. Gary serves as Executive Director of Open Doors Canada, part of an international ministry strengthening the most persecuted for 69 years in over 70 countries. Please welcome Pastor Gary Stagg and Andrew Croft.
Could praying put you in danger? Could going to church risk your life? Could following Jesus cost you your job, your home, or your family? Around the world today, our Christian brothers and sisters are counting the cost of their faith. And these are the 10 countries where the price of following Jesus is highest. Number 10, Afghanistan. The Taliban hunts for hidden networks of believers. Suspected Christians can be arrested, interrogated, and even killed. At number 9, Iran. House churches are seen as a threat to national security. Pastor Anushavan has started serving a 10-year prison sentence after 30 agents raided his home. Sudan is at number 8. In the chaos and conflict of civil war, Christians are especially vulnerable. Believers have been attacked, their property looted, and churches closed. Number 7, Pakistan. Pakistani Christians are seen as second-class citizens. False accusations of blasphemy result in innocent believers facing mob violence. Christian girls continue to be abducted and forced to convert to Islam. Nigeria is at number 6. More Christians are killed for their faith in Nigeria than in all the other countries of the world combined. Pastor Zachariah came home one day to find his village attacked and his wife and son murdered by militants. Number 5, Yemen. The very small number of Yemeni believers must worship in secret. House church leader Salah is on the wanted list, but despite death threats, he courageously continues his ministry. At number 4 is Eritrea. Christian activities are severely restricted. When Abdullah told people about Jesus, he was sent to prison. The conditions were so terrible that he never came out alive. Libya is at number 3 on the list. Libya considers itself to be a completely Islamic nation. Libyan believers who tell others about Jesus risk arrest and violent opposition. Number 2, Somalia. In this highly restrictive Islamic society, even the suspicion of being a Christian is extremely dangerous. Converts who are discovered may instantly pay with their lives. And at number 1, North Korea. This remains the most costly place in the world to be a Christian. Even owning a Bible is illegal. Jiho's father was taken away when security agents found his secret book. She never saw him again. Christians are sent to appalling labor camps or simply killed on the spot. More than 365 million Christians face high levels of persecution and discrimination. That's 1 in 7 Christians globally, and every one of them a son or daughter, a mother, a father, a child of God. For nearly 70 years, Open Doors has been supporting our Persecuted Church family, helping them to stand strong. They are counting the cost of following Christ, and with your help, they can keep believing, knowing that Jesus is worth everything.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. We so much appreciate it. I'm Gary, as was mentioned earlier, and this is...
I'm Andrew.
Andrew.
And it's an honor and a privilege to be here this morning. Now, if you've never heard of Open Doors, or maybe you've just forgotten, Open Doors is, as was mentioned, a ministry that strengthens persecuted Christians. We were founded by a guy by the name of Brother Andrew, and he wrote this book. It's called God's Smuggler. Now, if you have never read this book, it is an incredible story of Brother Andrew's journey behind the Iron Curtain, smuggling Bibles to the church that was living under communism. And so that's where we got started almost 70 years ago. Now today, we continue to work across the globe in more than 70 countries, strengthening our brothers and sisters in many, many ways. One of the significant things that we do as well is research. So we do research on Christian persecution around the world. This is happening throughout the calendar year, both in the field and behind desks. And that research is compiled into a document which we call the World Watch List, which you saw the top 10 on the list this morning, but the list actually it's a ranking of the top 50 countries in the world where it's most dangerous to live as a Christian. It's really a respected research. It's research that we actually take to Ottawa with us, and every year we meet with our MPs and explain to them what's happening in the world of Christian persecution. So that event is growing. We were preempted by the death of Brian Mulrooney, and he was lying in state on the day that we were supposed to be there this year. But they've rescheduled us to go at the end of April, I think it is, this month. And so there's still time for you to invite your MP to come to our meeting. We really rely on people just like you to
invite your MP. If you want to know how to do that, you can come to our table at the end of the service. We'll explain to you how you can do it. But if you don't get to the table, go to our website and just it says get involved, and there's a drop-down menu, invite your MP. It's very easy. You just put in your postal code and click, 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 and an invitation is automatically sent to your MP. So the more invitations they get, the more pressure they feel to come to our event. Last year we had 44 MPs sign up to come and hear about the World Watch List and about what's happening in Christian persecution around the world. And the research is showing us, as I'm sure none of you would be surprised, that both the intensity and the global spread of persecution is on the rise. Where you live as a Christian in this world really does matter. It was mentioned on the video that globally more than 365 million Christians suffer high to extreme levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. That's 1 in 7 Christians globally. If you live in Africa, the numbers change to 1 in 5. If you live in Asia, it's 2 in 5. Last year, we saw a 7-fold increase in the number of churches that were attacked or closed down. For instance, in China, China saw the largest number of churches closed. 10,000 churches closed in China this past year, either closed or not allowed to reopen because they used the whole COVID thing, where many of the churches that existed were existing in a legal gray area as what they call house churches. Mind you, some of these house churches would be like 1,000 people or even more. But the government, after everything closed down, now they haven't given permission. They use that opportunity to kind of keep them shut down. And so we're seeing this squeeze on the church in China. In India, it saw the second largest number of churches closed, with some 400 just in Manipur state alone. And in that same area, we saw 120 Christians killed for their faith, 4,500 buildings, Christian buildings and homes were destroyed, and approximately 50,000 believers have been displaced in that area. In Algeria, out of the 46 churches associated with the banner Protestant umbrella, only 4 remain open today, and it's thought that those remaining 4 will most likely be closed down by the end of 2024. We know that at least 18 Christians received prison sentences in Algeria as well this past year.
You think about that, you had as many churches gathering for Good Friday to work together than there are Protestant churches in the country of Algeria, because so many have been closed down. Now, we've thrown a lot of numbers at you, and the funny thing is Gary doesn't even like numbers, but he's thrown a lot of numbers at you, but the reality is that we're not about numbers, but those numbers help us. Those numbers show us, the numbers in the research show us that persecution is growing, but it also helps us know where we need to be working, where we need to be sending our prayers, sending our resources so that we can continue to strengthen the persecuted church. And as Gary mentioned, that research also allows us to speak truth to power, to go to our parliamentarians and say, yes, you need to be talking to governments about this. You need to be standing up for the freedom of religion and belief.
And it's true, our heart isn't for the numbers, but the numbers do direct our work. So we're not just working randomly around the world, it's really directed work. Our heart is not for the numbers, though. For me, he said, I don't like numbers. I'm more into people. So my heart is more for the many men, women, and children behind those numbers who face that kind of persecution for their faith on a daily basis. And you may ask, well, what does that look like? What does being persecuted look like? Well, it could mean being rejected by your family and community, losing access to your own children, finding yourself on the streets. It could mean being forced to choose between keeping your children safe or following Jesus. How would you like to have that as a decision today? following Jesus or keeping my children safe. It could mean being forced to, it could mean being threatened or raped, beaten, or even killed for your faith. It could mean running for your life because you're being hunted down like an animal.
Now, there are many concerning trends in the World Watch List, and we actually have several copies of this out at the table, and we encourage you to grab one of these guidebooks. It's got information about all 50 countries and prayer points. But one of the most concerning trends is what is happening in sub-Saharan Africa. And so, sub-Saharan Africa has become the epicenter of violent persecution. There's so much happening. And so, Gary, you want to tell us a little bit about what is happening?
Well, Jesus said in John chapter 10, verse 10, that the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And we're seeing that scenario of the thief being played out in sub-Saharan Africa after many centuries of missionaries spreading the gospel throughout and establishing Christian communities throughout that whole region. The church is being threatened today with violence such as we have never seen before, and that violence is really growing even as we speak. Every year, thousands of Christians are being killed for their faith by Islamic militants. Every year, thousands more lose their homes, lose their land, lose their livelihoods. The enemy has come to steal and to kill and to destroy. Their goal is to destabilize families, to extinguish faith, and to crush the life of the church. Nigeria seems to be the epicenter of this escalating violence. Last year, between 11 and 14 people a day lost their lives for their faith just in Nigeria alone. But it's spreading across the surrounding areas as well. And our violence statistics count incidents such as killings, abductions, unlawful detention, rape, and severe beatings because of one's Christian faith. And this year's list reveals that out of the 10 countries in the world where Christians experience the most violence for their faith, 7 of those 10 now are in sub-Saharan Africa. This year, there were 16 sub-Saharan countries that scored extremely high in the area of violence. That's compared to 13 last year. And so the violence numbers are growing, and they're going in the wrong way. And Open Doors, as an organization, we only record those incidents that we can actually verify. We're very conservative when we talk about these numbers. It's quite likely that the numbers are even greater because we know that much of persecution, including killings and rapes and all of these things, happen in very rural areas, happen behind closed doors or in prison camps and so on. And so it's quite likely that the recorded figures that we have is just the tip of the iceberg.
Now, as we mentioned, we're not about numbers, we're about people. And so I want to tell you about one of our sisters in Christ. Her name is Leah Sheribu. Leah Sheribu, February 2018, 14 years old, going to high school in Dapchi State in Nigeria. And extremists attacked their school and kidnapped more than 100 girls. A month later, in March of 2018, every one of those girls was released, except for Leah Sheribu. Because Leah Sheribu, when given the opportunity to deny her faith in Christ and go home to her parents, said no. She was given the opportunity to convert, become a Muslim, and she said no. She sent a message home with her friends to her parents, and I'll paraphrase it for you this morning, but it went like this: Mom and Dad, you taught me at the breakfast table that Jesus is close to people in pain. And I am experiencing that now. But I want you to know that I will see you again, whether here on earth or in the bosom of our Father in heaven. As a 14-year-old girl, fully knowing this decision could cost her her entire life, Leah said, no, I refuse to deny Jesus Christ. Now the reality is Leah Sheribu remains in captivity today. The extremist group that has taken her has declared her a slave for life. Unconfirmed reports say she has now been married off to her second general of this extremist group. And this is the life that she's living because she chose to follow Jesus. And so Leah is someone that we talk about a lot because she is a face and a name that we do know, but the reality is that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of girls in Nigeria alone who are missing because they have been kidnapped because they are Christians. And so these stats, these stories are so concerning to us as a ministry that Open Doors has launched a 4-year campaign called Arise Africa. And so we, over the next 4 years, our goal is to see the global church rise up in prayer, to stand with our brothers and sisters in sub-Saharan Africa against the violent persecution that they are facing. And so if you follow Open Doors, if you get on our social media, you're going to hear a lot about Africa because this is a very concerning trend for us. In that 4 years, our goal is to, by the end of it, to be helping 4 million Christians in sub-Saharan Africa alone by the end of that. We're planning to speak truth to power as often as we can, make sure that we're talking to governments. In fact, we are going to be sharing about that later this month, as we said, at Parliament. And our goal is, like I said, is to see the global church rise up in prayer. And so later this morning, we're going to spend some time praying for our persecuted family. But we want you to know what is happening in Africa. We want you to be aware of what is happening to our brothers and sisters. But we're going to move on to the next element of the morning. I'm going to call Pastor to come up and take us into the next element.
Thank you, gentlemen. This can seem very theoretical for us as Canadians. Sometimes we think, we're kind of being persecuted in Canada. NAC didn't get the government grant that we thought we would get, and then we are brought to reality that this is real persecution. But for some of you who are maybe new Canadians, you maybe just have 1 degree of separation of some of these stories. I'm going to invite Mani Jahani if she would come.
Most of the pastors and whoever they taught who actually Jesus is were killed. His own pastor was stabbed 27 times in front of his home, and so many first-hand stories that I know and I heard from the people who I really trust. But one very family that comes to my mind that Amir and we both met with them in Dubai in several seminars, and they used to come and participate. As I speak, they are in the prison because last Christmas they had a gathering at their home, just inviting people, despite of being warned to not do that. But they got arrested. They are in jail at the moment, including their 22 years old son, which was present at the gathering. So yes, that's one of the stories that, one of the people that I know personally.
I trying to remember your story. Did you become a Christian while in Iran, or you did?
No. My husband and we were out of Iran. We actually never had a chance, to hear about the truth. Sometimes I think here we take it for granted, the freedom of having the freedom of the truth around us available. But no, we never had a chance to hear it. And when we moved to Dubai, we got to know a very good people and church. And I can't even say that we have paid the price compared to other people that they lost their family, their relationships, the kids. I can't even compare what we've gone through with what they have gone through. So yes, we had to choose leave and not go back to our country. But I don't call it, like in comparison with the others.
But your heart must be broken seeing them at number 9, and your homeland, it just must be broken. Yeah.
Yes, please keep praying for those countries that you saw the name. They are not just.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Monty. We show your appreciation to Monty. And just out of interest, I just wonder if you feel comfortable, if you maybe visited, came from a country, know somebody, one degree of separation of people who are being persecuted. Would you just raise your hand? Yeah, so there are some people in our midst. Yeah.
For the next few moments, we want to talk to you about one country in particular, and that is the number 1 country on the World Watch List, North Korea. Now, North Korea has been number 1 on the World Watch List every year since 2002, except for 1 year. This is because it is illegal to be a Christian in North Korea. It's illegal to own a Bible. We hear stories of those who do own Bibles where they actually bury it in their garden. And when they want to read it, they go out to their garden at night, they dig it up so that they can read it, and they bury it again. Because if they are caught with a Bible, they and likely their entire family will be thrown into prison because of owning a Bible. Now, we know of a family from 2009, the whole family, including a 2-year-old child, were arrested and sentenced to life in prison camp just because they were found to be in possession of a Bible, right? So, like the entire family, 2-year-old, sent to prison camp because their family owned a Bible. For Christians, capture, arrest, even death is just one mistaken away. They live in constant fear and constant pressure of that.
Yeah, and the labor camps that he's talking about are certainly not like the penal system in Canada. In fact, we estimate through our research that there is a minimum of 60,000 Christians in brutal labor camps in North Korea. That represents more than the entire population of prisoners in our Canadian penal system. And that's just Christians alone in North Korea that live there and that live in these camps. And inmates in those camps end up looking like skeletons from malnutrition and perpetual diarrhea, and oftentimes they're ingesting contaminated food and so on. And so, it's not just being worked almost to death, but it's also the sickness and all of that goes along with it, and they're just forced to continue to work, and they're beaten and forced into uncomfortable positions for very long periods of time, and always subjected to constant verbal abuse. One of the things that really got me was a revelation about North Korea. I was in the UK, and I met with a person who grew up in North Korea, and she explained to me the conflict that she had with finding a Bible in her house. If you live in North Korea, you're brainwashed by the state. The state is number 1. Your family is always secondary to the supreme leader. And so anything that goes against the state, then you feel that, it's your duty to actually report that. So she talks about how she was conflicted one day. She went into a closet in her house and she was rummaging around and she found a Bible. And immediately her initial instinct was that she had to report this and to report her parents that they had a Bible in their house, knowing that would quite likely put her parents in a labor camp. She talked to them first, thankfully, and they talked to her, and over time, they explained to her the gospel message, and she accepted Christ, and they were safe. But yeah, praise God is indeed. But what it brought to my mind was this. is that in North Korea, parents can't even tell their children that they're living in a Christian home because it's too dangerous for them to have that kind of information. They wait until they're of an age where they feel that they can be trusted with that information and then share the gospel with them. But imagine that, us in Canada, where we're able to bring our children, put them in Christian programs and raise them in a Christian home in North Korea. That's such a dangerous thing. They would never do it.
Now, North Korea is incredibly dangerous for Christians. Often the stories that we end up hearing are because people have escaped North Korea. But that's becoming more difficult in recent months. Now, with COVID, North Korea shut their borders completely. Now, last August, they reopened them with China. And then within weeks of that, China started sending hundreds of North Korean refugees back to their native country. There was 80 in August, 40 more in September, and in early October, we had reports of more. It's at the beginning of this year, it was believed to be as many as 600, and that number is probably increasing. Now, we're not sure how many of those are Christians, but it's likely that some of them are. I was reading a testimony of a North Korean believer, someone who's escaped from the country and had actually been sent back and gone to prison. And he talked about, he was asked in prison if he had heard about Christianity in China. And he said it was foolish to say no, because North Korea just assumes that you have. Right? So many most North Korean refugees escaping the country will meet someone in China to tell them about Jesus. And so we don't know how many of them are believers, but it's certain that these returnees are at high risk of being detained in forced labor camps, face torture, sexual violence, and even execution. It's also getting worse at the border between Russia and North Korea as well. I read a story this week of a South Korean missionary living in Russia who has now been arrested by Russian authorities because he was helping North Korean refugees. Russia is really clamping down on this now. They don't want anyone helping North Korean refugees, and so they're trying to grow their closeness as well for a variety of political reasons. And so you can imagine North Korea is just so difficult, and yet we hear incredible stories of courageous Christians. And I just want to quickly tell you the story of Hae Woo. Now, Hae Woo is safe in South Korea now. She has escaped the country. But she did spend time in a prison camp in North Korea for her faith in Jesus. And when she was there, she felt God telling her to do something crazy. And that was to plant a church in this prison camp. And so she is in the most dangerous country, in the most dangerous place to be a Christian, in the most dangerous country to be a Christian. And God says, no, you need to plant a church. And so the little amount of rice that she was given, she started sharing it with others, particularly those who were sick or worse off than her. And she began to share the gospel. And a little church formed in this prison camp in North Korea. There was only one place in the prison camp that they could meet: the toilets. Because it smelled so putrid, the guards would not go in. And so they would meet together, and Hae Woo would share what scriptures she had memorized and learned with them, and they would mouth songs together because they just couldn't risk being overheard. And you think about the amazing experience we're having this morning at church, and you compare it to Hae Woo and these believers' experience having church in a toilet. It just reminds us that being a Christian, our experience of being a Christian is not the norm. That the global church has a very different experience of following Christ. In a few moments, we're going to go into a time of prayer. But before we do that, we wanted to show you a video. It is a reenactment of a letter written and smuggled out of North Korea by a young woman named Bae. And so you're going to hear her letter. They're going to reenact the story. And there's actually a message in there for us, the church in Canada. And so I do encourage you to watch this and think about the words that she has for you this morning.
Dear brother, we are well and at peace through the grace of Jesus Christ and your prayers. I'm overwhelmed as I write this to you because we have received gifts from you that we can never fully repay. When our Bible was found, it was immediately destroyed. And because we are Christians, we were exiled to a remote village with no chance of ever leaving. Work here is hard. Rations are limited. We are always hungry or sick. We need to forage to survive. But every morning when I open my eyes, I feel the presence of Hananim, the Lord, and thank our Father God that I'm still strong enough to be used as His servant.
사람이 떡으로만 살 것이 아니요 하나님의 입으로 나오는 모든 말씀으로 살 것이라.
Even though it was difficult, I recently was able to cross the border into China. There, I met with other Christians. They gave me food, medicine, and by the grace of God, a new Bible. I was offered a place to stay in China. It would have meant freedom. But I could not abandon my family and the church, however small it may be. From your perspective, brother, our suffering must appear as though we live a cursed life. However, we see it as a blessing because it is a shortcut to the Father. But yet, brother, I have one more request: that you send our gratitude to those who continue to pray for us. In return, we'll stay healthy and continue to spread the gospel throughout North Korea. Your sister in Christ, Bae.
You know, we could leave here thinking that the church, you know, many of our brothers and sisters around the world, and the church that's represented by the Persecuted Church is a defeated church. But the reality is that they're anything but defeated. In fact, Mani, I don't know if you know this, but in Iran, which, you know, it's way up there on the list. Persecution is quite intense in Iran, and people are being thrown into prison. We hear all the time, almost weekly, more Christians that are being thrown into prison. And when the revolution happened in Iran, missiologists, I think they put the number of Christians around 500 in the whole country. But now we know that there is a minimum of 1 million Christians in the country of Iran. So we have to know that even in persecution, and despite persecution, God is still at work. And He's building His church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And so I wanted to put that in there this morning, just a way of encouraging us that even when times get tough for us, that God is still at work. He's still going to do what He needs to do. He's still going to build His church. And so let that be an encouragement to you. Also, before I forget, I want to thank Nicolette, who is one of our team members at the back. She's the voice that you heard on the videos and all of that stuff. She's right there, and she's working the magic back there with all of the technical stuff. And so thank you, Nicolette. We appreciate so much all your work today. And you may ask, well, why is it important for us to, that was interesting this morning, but why is it important for us to know this stuff? And, I say that it's important because of the importance that God places on the body of Christ, first and foremost. The Bible says that there is only one body, and when one part suffers, every part suffers. And I know that it's hard for us to grasp the significance of that verse because we live in a culture that celebrates independence over interdependence, don't we? But the early Christians saw very much meaning here. They talked about it as the mystery of the body of Christ, and they linked it to the sovereignty of God. They had that clear understanding, and the idea is that if in His sovereignty, God allows you to experience suffering to accomplish His purposes, because we are in a body together, your experience of suffering is not just for you. Your suffering is for me as well. And it's because that we are connected through Christ that God can accomplish His purposes in me in what happens to you. And He says in that verse, when one part suffers, every part suffers. When one part is honored, we all rejoice together. And so there is that idea of being connected to the global church of Jesus Christ. And as we relate that to the global church, we recognize that we are connected to our persecuted family members around the world, and that God's purposes for them and for us are interrelated. We can't separate them. You see, from God's perspective, their suffering is our suffering. And their victories are our victories. So it matters because we're all part of the same body. And with 1 in 7 of our family members today living with extreme levels of persecution, that cannot be unimportant to us because it is so important to God. Everything that we've shared here this morning is what we refer to in our organization as level 3 information. So level 3 information is stuff that I can talk about today. I don't have to worry with being live streamed or being taped and so on. I don't have to worry about getting anybody in trouble. The people that were actually called to help. So the names have been changed. A lot of it's been, just brought down to that level so I can share it with you. But that's level 3 information. There's level 2 information, which I can share with the team in my office. There's level 1 information that I can only share with just a select number of people. Then there's level 0, which can't be shared at all. And so what you're hearing today is again, like a tip of the iceberg. So I just want you to know that today, that what you're hearing today, multiply that by X number of times and you get an idea of what the real picture is like around the world. And I think it's important for us to understand that, to understand and be connected with the persecuted church, because they have so much to teach us about what real discipleship is all about and what it means to follow Jesus in a culture that's becoming increasingly hostile to the things of God and to the teachings of Scripture. I believe that in the days to come, even in our own country, that the persecuted church will become our mentors in how we're to respond in times where we feel that, we are being discriminated against and so on. The fact that someone would be willing to give up their lives for the sake of the gospel is one of the most powerful witnesses that we can come across, isn't it? Especially to people that are sitting on the fence when it comes to their faith, and they hear about people that are actually willing to lay down their lives for this. What a testimony that is, and I've seen that testimony ignite the faith of so many people in our own country. And that's why, as an organization, we feel a calling not to just tell you about the persecuted church, but to connect you with our brothers and sisters around the world, to make that connection, because we are one body together. And when we see the responses of these brothers and sisters around the world, it's truly countercultural to what we sometimes think in the West, because in the West we prefer revenge over forgiveness often, don't we? If we can just get back at them, then we would feel a lot better about that. But praying for those who persecute you and forgiving those who persecute you and perpetrate injustice towards you, that's not an easy thing. But our brothers and sisters in the persecuted church give us true examples of how to do that. Is it easy? No. We would say that it's almost impossible. But it is possible by the power of God, and we see that being lived out every day. And that's what Jesus asks us to do, isn't it? And he gives us the power to do that if we trust in him and not our own strength, but trust in his strength. He can help us to actually forgive those people that have perpetrated injustices towards us. I'll just close with this story today. A story of a mother by the name of Nadia, and again, not her real name, and her son Hanny, again, not real name. But we put names in here just to make it more human, I guess. They were on their way to a Christian retreat in the countryside when terrorists attacked their bus, and the terrorists asked each person on the bus to convert to Islam or die. They came with all their weapons onto the bus, and they stopped right next to this little boy, Hanny. Nadia was at the back of the bus with some other mothers, and she saw Hanny raise his wrist, which exposed a cross tattoo, which was something that was typical in that culture for them to wear a small cross tattoo to identify themselves as Christians. And so from the back of the bus, she saw Hanny, after these militants come onto the bus and saying, "Convert to Islam or die." She sees Hanny raise his wrist and hears his last words, "No, I am a Christian." Those are the last words that this young boy spoke. And Nadia says, maybe you think I'd rather have seen my son make a different choice. And of course, as a mother, I am terribly sad and angry that I lost my son. But I am happy that I witnessed the faith that I raised him in. I'm thankful that he wouldn't deny Christ, even with his life in danger. He made the right choice, she said, and that's a huge comfort to me. She survived the attack despite being struck by a bullet in her arm and the back of the bus. And she says that without God's comfort, I would have gone crazy. Her favorite Bible verse is from Matthew chapter 10, verse 28, where it says, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Instead, fear the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Nadia goes on and she says that if I meet the attackers of my son and they kill me for my faith, I'd be happy. Then I would join my son in heaven. But she says this, but I pray for them, that they will be touched by God so that they too can change their ways. What an amazing example to all of us today of forgiveness and how God uses our persecuted family members around the world. I often say that they are the greatest missionaries that the world knows. They're people that are in the culture, they are familiar, they're there, and they're ministering, even despite the persecution that they're going through. And people see the faith of these people, and they're drawn to Jesus. Thank God for our brothers and sisters around the world. Thank God for their faith and the example that their faith is to each and every one of us. We can learn so much. We can learn so much from them. And as an organization today, we are here to help you stand side by side with our persecuted brothers and sisters. One of the things that we always ask our persecuted family members when we're with them, what can we do for you? And guess what the number one thing is? Pray. And we're here to help you do that. We're here to help you pray for these brothers and sisters who share our faith but not our freedom.
Will you show your appreciation to Open Doors Canada? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us. So much appreciate you having us.
So good. Much of the New Testament, or at least large swaths of it, are written to people in prison, people being persecuted for their faith. And we may look at that and go, wow, they had it tough in the first century. Or we may go, well, I hope, if the day comes for us, that I'll have that kind of courage. But it's as we reread those letters and epistles and passages that we remember there's a good portion, maybe a majority part of the world, where those words of Jesus, those words of Paul are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. And they take courage from them and they take hope from them. When Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ because the power of salvation, it's not just, he's not embarrassed about it, He's talking about the choice between standing for Christ or maybe losing his life, but he won't be ashamed of it. So I just feel challenged today. Aren't you glad that the Spirit of God is no respecter of borders or walls or gates, that he will move in countries where he chooses, and sometimes it is actually the most oppressed where revival happens. And so we are praying for that, in particular in countries like North Korea that are so oppressed, repressed. Yeah. For those countries that can't even come to a church, for those countries that can't watch church, may we take courage from them, example from them, that we would actually be the church. You are a loved people. I hope you know that. God bless you.